Hi, my name's Jenny Miller and I'm the Domestic Abuse Service Manager at Rochdale Connections Trust. I'm here today with Holly. And Holly, if you can just give me something about you, what makes you Holly?
So I'm Holly. I'm trying to think what makes me me. I think first and foremost I'm my mum, partner, daughter, all those kind of labels. And then majority of work I do is around therapeutic stuff and helping people to get support, making sure people aren't left behind. So I think that gives me a bit of in terms of what I do.
So what is your job then?
My title is Project Service Manager, which doesn't actually tell you what I do. I help run mentoring services, counselling services. I supervise about 10 counsellors. But I've also got a private practice in the evenings that I run, supporting people one-to-one to make sure that obviously they get mental health needs met and they've got some support.
So busy?
Yes, very, but I love it. I love every minute of it.
Good. So, what's your story about then? When did it begin?
So, I think when I got asked to do this, I was thinking, what do I want to tell? And actually, don't really tell people a lot about my background. There's a few select people that know, but it's not something that I'm ever ashamed of, so I wanted to be able to share it. I got to about 16, and my relationship broke down with my mum, and it started from there.
Why was that?
I think she was going through some stuff with my sister and I was going through normal teenage rebellion stage. I'd been a fairly A-star, straight student all the way through, worked part-time, paid rent, all the normal things. And we went through a lot with my sister, who at the time sort of running away from home, hanging around with unsavoury characters. And, there was a lot of leaning on me to look after my sister as well. So when I hit sort of 16, maybe 16 and a half, started going to sixth form, I went on one night out and didn't come back, and it wasn't received very well when I got home.
Okay.
So I never went home after that day.
So what did you do?
Spent quite a lot of time on sofas. I met somebody and slept at their house, people's floors, friends' houses, and then eventually after months of doing that, I went into a hostel and went from there.
Was you still doing sixth form?
No, I'd dropped out. I never really thought that was for me anyway. It was after doing education for years and doing really well, it was so tight and I wanted something that I could be a bit more free in. And, with sixth form and you're not allowed to leave the campus even though you've got a 4-hour free period, It never really fit what I wanted. So I sort of left looking for, okay, I can't really do that while I'm homeless because I never know where I'm sleeping day to day. So I've had to obviously leave education. And then I got pregnant, so it was never going to be going back because I was pregnant.
Okay. So, pregnant, homeless, just gone into a hostel.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts? What were you planning?
God, I've no idea. I didn't know what I was going to do in terms of pregnancy. I think it was actually my little sister, who was 15 at the time, that was very excited when I told her, and that's what made me decide, actually, that's something I want to go through with. And it definitely the best decision I ever made. But obviously one that was tough when you were homeless and you didn't have any family support and no money and no job and no career. And yeah, it wasn't the easiest time.
How was your mum with your pregnancy?
I didn't tell anyone. I didn't find out I was pregnant till I was 4 months gone because I was just all over the place. So I was literally walking around with a JD bag full of clothes and I didn't even know it. Period was like the last thing on my mind. Never noticed anything. And yeah, so it was quite late on, so I think by then they kind of had just had to accept that was it, what it was. My dad called me a stupid cow, but then said, I love you and I'll do whatever you need me to. But didn't have room for me to stay there because I had my brothers and my sister all staying in a small house, so couldn't take me in. And then my mum, I think my mum came with me to my 5-month scan, and that's the first time she'd probably spoken to me properly in about 6 months, and didn't really. She was quite unforgiving at that time. We're a very different relationship now, but at that time was quite unforgiving, and I think took a lot of what happened very personally. And I don't blame her for that at all. It can't have been nice after my sister doing what she did for then me to go and do something similar.
Yeah.
So, looking back and reflecting on it, I understand why, but I think she became then, knowing I was pregnant, more of a support and started to change the relationship then.
So what happened next?
I moved into a hostel in Rochdale, met some absolutely fantastic people actually. I don't think that when people always said, did you not hate it living there? I think, no, I didn't. They were so lovely and they looked after me like family. And probably because they know what it's like not to have one. And I was 16 and frightened.
Yeah.
So they really did look after me. I got some support from a worker that worked, I can't remember where she works for, but she's still Rochdale based now, or Middleton. So she ended up getting me some therapy through, I think it was Hype at the time.
Right.
So I went and had a couple of sessions, or 12 sessions, or whatever you had back then. And then she got me into a mother and baby unit in Rochdale.
Wow.
Made sure that I had everything I needed, got me support worker, and it kind of went from there, really. So I think the hostel was probably the lower part of not knowing what was going to happen and being quite frightened, and not everybody being savoury, not everyone being nice, and not everyone being kind. And there was some times in there that I didn't feel very comfortable. But again, staff being really good and making sure I was looked after.
So you can kind of, you really get like the hostel and the supported housing kind of thing now. So what was going through your mind? What was the next step for you?
Obviously moved out of the hostel into the mother and baby unit, and it was more about, okay, let's have the baby, but get back into education, because I never wanted to take that gap, really. I think if I'd not have left home, the likelihood would have been I would have left, worked for maybe 12 months and then gone back into a college rather than a sixth form.
Yeah.
So it was, let's follow something similar in terms of that plan. I spent the first year of my son being born probably living all over the place still, because I obviously moved out of mother and baby unit, moved back in with family, stayed somewhere else, until I got my first property when he was just before he was 1, and then was fairly settled. Again, got more support from another support worker that I'm not going to mention, but absolutely loved. Used to come round and help me out with anything I needed, and which really she would just come and have a brew, because she'd always come round and say, do you want me to help you clean up or do anything? But like, no, it's all done. I'm pretty good with stuff like that. Again, my mum brought us up in a way where we lived with a single parent. We had to be on top of things, and bills always had to be paid, and we knew how to manage all that kind of stuff from being really young, so that was never really an issue. And then I went back into college just before he turned 2. So I'd had them 2 years at home with him. Loved it, absolutely loved it, but needed something different. He was a very sickly child, so I spent a lot of time in hospital with breathing difficulties and asthma and whatever else. So I'm glad that I didn't work or do anything because of that. But actually, when your brain starts to go a bit mushy and you think, it's time to go back now. So he started nursery, I started college. I did a 2-year course at Hotwood Hall, and then I went to university to do my undergraduate. Worked part-time while I was doing that, and then went on to do my postgraduate. Again, worked while I was doing that. Volunteered everywhere you could think of, so I got experience of what I wanted to work in and what I didn't. Yeah. And then kind of it's just carried on going up and up and up from there.
Looking back then, knowing what you went through, you went from kind of living in a family and growing up with a single mum who had boundaries and rules, and you knew how to clean and do your bills and everything, and all of a sudden you were flitting around from one place to another. But in your mind there must have been something what kind of didn't give up for any reason. Why was that?
I think the support workers and the counsellor who sort of said, because I went into counselling knowing I always wanted to do either counselling or social work. Right. And knowing that from probably being about 12 years old, I wanted to do a job where I could help people. Okay. And it was around mental health. I don't know why I thought social work would do that, because I know that that's not the case now, but back then it was actually have a look at supportive roles, and it was always my favourite thing to do. So I think when I went into counselling and experienced what someone did for me, it just gave me that little bit of life doesn't have to be like this. You get to choose. And even though my family weren't, I didn't speak to any of them when I started having counselling. And I remember her doing an exercise where she pulled out a load of characters and asked me to describe each character as one of my family members, and she watched where I placed them all and watched where I placed myself, and it was just felt, actually, yeah, I can do this. I have to make my own family.
Yeah.
I have to do things for myself, because I could sit and think, oh, I've got no family, no money, and I'm homeless, or I could do something about it.
Okay.
So that was where I thought, right, but I know that at that time it's different than it is now, I feel. I think if I'd have gone through that now in today's society,
Yeah.
with the limited opportunities people have got, and funding wise it's not always there, I was really lucky in terms of having the support workers that I had.
Yeah.
I remember my washing machine being broken and one of them saying, oh, don't worry, we'll get you something, and 2 weeks later a washing machine turned up, because there was a fund there that was able to pay for that for people that didn't have a lot of money. I don't think it's that easy now, in terms of things being restricted.
So if you could go back and change anything.
Oh. Do you know what? I don't think anything. I'm trying to think. I think there's definitely some relationships I probably would have chosen not to get into. You know, some of them that were... I stayed single for quite a long time before I met my current partner, because I didn't want to introduce people to my son that weren't going to stay in his life, so it was just having dates and stuff like that. But I think there's definitely some of those characters that I would think, no, I could have done without that. Especially when you're trying to study and you've got all, you know, you want to concentrate on things that are going to progress you, and then you get into a relationship and it's not a nice. And there's definitely a drawing of you're a single parent, you should be in a relationship. Again, friends always saying, well, you're single, you know, that kind of you need some kind of damp in your son. And like, actually, I wish I'd not listened to some of that and just stayed and done what I wanted to do. But I think, because it does get lonely at times, and I know that it was a long time being on my own, so I'm trying to think that's probably what I would change, some of the relationships that I got into. The rest of it, story-wise, I don't think anything. Yeah. I learned so much from the people that I lived with in the hostel, from my whole experience. I think all of it, even though bad things happened, it's all a learning experience. It's got me to where I am now. Yeah. And I'm stronger for it.
Well, that was my next question. Do you consider yourself a strong person?
Yeah. I don't think you can go through all that without... there has to be some resilience there, but that is down to the people that supported me as well. Yeah. When I didn't have my family, and like I said, when my son was born, family was absolutely there. Yeah. And I've been ever since, and we've had countless amounts of holidays out of it because of all the stuff that happened. So, you know, I've been very lucky.
So you benefited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm advocating this. Yeah.
So how do you think your friends and family would describe you?
Oh, well, it depends who you speak to. Friends probably would say it's consistent support. I love them to pieces. I tell them all the time I love them to pieces, because they were there for me at my hardest times and I've been there for them at theirs. So I think we've got a really loving relationship with my friends, and I count my friends on one hand, because I have people I'm acquainted with and people I love, but they're not there like they are. And they know me inside and out. I actually could tell everyone one of my best mates is my soulmate, because she's just in everything. Yeah. And been there through thick and thin. Family, trying again, who would you speak to? Probably tell you I just moan all the time. Yeah, she's a right whinger, but we'll do anything for any of them. I don't really expect stuff back. I help people out if they need it. Try and look after them. I don't know. I try and have a laugh with people.
How would your son describe you?
Oh my God, he calls me a smother. I don't feel like I am, but that's his nickname, Smother, because I look after him and I love him, but to death. And I feel like we've given him loads of freedom in this past sort of 12 months, with him age range changing, and he's left school. But again, with GCSEs and stress and COVID, there was a lot of me sitting at the side of him going, do that now. So yeah, he probably would tell you that I just nag him all the time, but it is always, and he knows it's for his benefit. Yeah. He also knows that at 10 o'clock last night, I, in my pyjamas, went to pick him up because he missed the bus. So he'll tell you that I'll drop anything to make sure he's okay. But trying to keep some boundaries in there as well of I'm not giving you money all the time and go and get a job and all the norms. So, yeah.
So what words of advice would you offer someone who was going through what you've been through?
I think it's really easy to focus on all the negative things. And as in, it's not a good situation to be in. Living in a hostel was never something I wanted to experience. I never really wanted to live in a mother and baby unit. That was never on my cards. I didn't really want to be a parent till I was in my 30s. But it happened, and I had to find a way to accept it and work with it, and I did. And I think that's what I would say to people. Go and have the therapy. Go and get the support. Don't sit on your own. Don't be lonely with it. You know, I still go for therapy now, even if I'm all right. I think, well, it's good to have something there just in case. So I think that's me just being an advocate for mental health and not being on your own with things. Talk to people. I had a college tutor that was absolutely brilliant with me in terms of, still is now actually, still keeps in contact and tells me how brilliant I am and how proud of me she is. And I think it's that when you have those connections with other people and they're praising you for the good things you're doing, it makes you work harder. So I think that's what I'd be saying to people. Just don't be on your own with things.
Which is, you know, I actually would advocate that as well. But so you're Rochdale based.
I am.
And you talk about the support you had in Rochdale. So would you consider that, or would you say that Rochdale has helped you?
Oh my God, 100%. I hear loads of bad things about Rochdale, and you know, I live with two people that don't want to live here and they want to move, and I love it. I love my hometown because I was born here. It's given me so many opportunities. I had grants from I can't remember what they're called, but I think it's Rochdale Charitable Trust for my college and my university to help me get there. You know, scholarship money to do my masters. I would never have been able to afford the fees and stuff if it wasn't for things like that. So there are things that are there for in terms of education. But I think in terms of like supporting me into housing and, you know, helping me, I at 17 years old known how to manage all these bills and all these extra things. I didn't even know we had to pay council tax until someone came round and showed me. So it's that kind of having there's a lot of support out there for people. And people just saying to you, well, have you thought about this? And yeah, I'll advocate for Rochdale all day long. I think there's loads of opportunities for things, you know, people can get involved in, even from, you know, baby classes that you can go and do that I did, baby massage and all them things when I didn't know how to be a mum because I'd never done it before. But being around other mums helped teach me all the things I needed to know.
So what about women then in Rochdale? Has any Rochdale woman inspired you, or if not, anybody in the world?
Yeah, I think when I watched... I always think there's a little bit of me that always wants to send my mum because she brought two kids up on her own and had a crappy job until she was in her late 30s, went back to college, did her GCSEs, her A-levels, and then studied at university and has been a teacher ever since. You know, for me, that's inspiring to, at that age, to decide to change everything about yourself. And again, been in some really crappy relationships and whatever else, so there's a bit of me that always wants to send my mum. But then I think watching some of the professionals I've worked with, working where I work with some really headstrong, inspiring women that definitely I started where I work as a volunteer and I've worked my way up, but because I've been pushed to try new things, go and learn this, go and do this course, and I've watched what they do as well, so I feel like there's a lot of people I could probably thank.
So for me, you know, listening to all that, and I feel very privileged to listen to all that, it's a story of kind of dips and, you know, lows
Absolutely.
and highs, and throughout that, something within you kept you going. And yes, there were support workers to help you with that, but there was something built in within you to kind of a tower of strength or something.
Yeah, I think it's just resilience, isn't it? You know, you get knocked down, you get back up. There isn't any other way to do it. It's about how you deal with after effects of things. Of course, I've been through bad things, but then you accept it and you move on, which I know isn't easy for people, and trauma's a real thing, and we all go through bad things, but I think it's, like I said, asking for the help. How do you manage it? How do you cope with things after they happen?
And accepting the help.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. I had, and I think I said before, I had a counsellor, she was a counsellor now for Middleton, I think she works in. Not a counsellor like me as a counsellor is in like the MP type, but used to work for a service, and she was the one who got me into everything. If I'd not have had a good relationship with her, she just made me laugh, she just got me. But if I'd not have had a good relationship with her, I wouldn't have accepted any of the help. I wouldn't have ever got into counselling, the mother and baby unit. I wouldn't have accepted the other support worker. Yeah. Because I felt like I was being judged all the time. They never made me feel like that once.
Yay, Rochdale.
So
women.
yeah, absolutely, and it was all women as well. Actually, I'm coming to think of it now, thinking, did any men have any influence in this? I'm like, nah, they didn't. So yeah, it's definitely something that, and I think that's why I wanted to work in a charity and wanted to work in Rochdale Borough to give back for things that I had taken.
Oh, nice.
Well, it's what I said I would do on all my bursaries and grants that I got for university. So
You've kept to your word.
So I've kept
then.
to my word and make sure people had opportunities like I did.
Well, that's lovely, and I'm sure that'll inspire many of the listeners.
Thank you.
So thank you for giving your time and doing this for us, and I'll pet your head a bit to do it.
That's fine.
But yeah, that was absolutely fab. Thank you, Holly.
Bro.